half hour and Westchester Borough Committee work. This is the Finance and Revenue Committee meeting beginning at 6:30. Bernie Flynn, myself, the 6th Ward, Mr. Brian McGinnis, Mr. Nick Allen is away on family issues. Department Head Barbara Leoni, Finance Director, and Borough Manager, Mr. Sean Metrick. So calling to order the meeting. Any comments, suggestions, petitions from residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda? No one moved. So let's move on to number 3. Discussion items. The 2021 draft finals, the draft financials presented by Mr. Dale Umbrower, CPA, manager of Mealy.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you for dressing so handsomely.
Of course, I wouldn't leave home unless I was dressed like this. So obviously the financial statements are too long for me to go through the entire thing, so I just picked some areas where I thought that would be the most interest to you guys, and I'll go over that. So the first thing I want to point out is the opinion. You may have noticed that the opinion changed. We had some new auditing standards that we had to implement in the current year, and one of those made a change to the way we report the opinion. So if you remember in the past, the opinion was buried at the top of page 2. Now it's the very first thing you see. So the very first the two first paragraphs of the opinion are now the basis for the opinion and the actual opinion itself. And so our opinion is that in all material respects, the financial statements are fairly presented. The statement of net position, this is the government-wide statement of net position. So this is the balance sheet for the government-wide, and this is similar to a for-profit business in that we record capital assets and all the debt, pension obligations and OPEB obligations. So we had total current assets on the governmental activities side of $5.7 million. We had total non-current assets of $29.5 million, total assets of $35.2 million. We had deferred outflows of resources related to OPEB and pensions of $2.5 million, giving us total assets and deferred outflows of $37.7 million. We had current liabilities of $2.8 million, total non-current liabilities of $15.7 million, or total liabilities of $18.5 million. Deferred inflows of resources related to pension and OPEB of $9.3 million. Leaves us with net position of $9,957,227 for the year. On the business type activities side, we had total current assets of $11.1 million, total non-current assets of $28.4 million, giving us total assets of $39.5 million. We had some deferred outflows of resources related to pensions of $116,000, giving us a total assets and deferred outflows of $39.6 million for the year. Current liabilities on the business type activities are $1,017,000. The non-current liabilities are $12.8 million, giving us total liabilities of $13.8 million. We had some deferred inflows of resources related to pensions of $471,000, leaving us net position for the year of $25.3 million. I want to point out that in the prior year, we had a net pension liability of $1.7 million. In the current year, that has flipped to an asset of $2,353,000. Of course, after the markets settle in 2022, it's going to be back to a liability next year. But next page, we have the statement of activities, and this is basically the income statement on the government-wide. So we had total governmental activities expenditures of $18.5 million. We had charges for services of $5.9 million, operating grants and contributions of $784,000, and capital grants and contributions of $320,000. That left us with net expense on the governmental activities of $11.5 million, and that's the amount that needed to be made up by the general revenues. General revenues, of course, being the taxes, grants not subject to specific purposes, and investment earnings. So we had general revenues of $15.8 million for the year, and that gave us a positive change in net position for the year of $4.3 million on the governmental activities side. On the business type activities side, we had $6.5 million of expenditures, $10.1 million of charges for services, $7,950 of operating grants and contributions, and that gives us and then we had some transfers out to the general fund So that gives us a positive change for the year in the business type activities of $1,034,789. The balance sheet in the governmental funds, so this is the fund level statements. So this does not include capital assets. This does not include debt. It's only focused on current resources. So we had total assets on the general fund of 3.2 million, total liabilities of 8.9 million, of which 6.9 million of that is due to other funds. We had total deferred inflows of resources of 525,000 related to the notes receivable and property taxes. And we had total fund balance of negative 6,273,997. The capital operating reserve fund, we had total assets of 8.3 million and total fund balance of 8.3 million with no liabilities. The stormwater fund, we have total assets of 1.6 million, total liabilities of 2.2 million, giving us a negative fund balance of 564,000. The debt service fund has total assets of 606,000, no liabilities, and total fund balance of 606,000. The non-major governmental funds has total assets of 1,472,000, total liabilities of 401,990, some deferred inflows of resources related to notes receivable, and fund balance of 1,034,511. On a resource focused general fund, we had total revenues of 17.4 million for the year. We had total expenditures of 20.6 million. We had some proceeds from the tax anticipation note of 2.5 million, transfers in of 3.2 million, and transfers out of 1.2 million. That gave us a positive change for the year of 1,261,511 on the general fund. On the capital operating reserve fund, we had total revenues of negative 20,316, and the reason that the revenues are negative is because the net investment income was actually a loss of 87,478. Total expenditures, $13,542. We had some transfers out of 500,000, giving us a net change in fund balance for the year of negative 533,858. The stormwater fund, we had total revenues of 1,460,000, total expenditures of 1,246,000, transfers out of 100,000, giving us a positive change for the year of 114,291. The debt service fund, we had revenues of $37. We had outlays of 25,000, giving us a negative change for the year of 24,960. The non-governmental funds, we had total revenues of 1.5 million, total expenditures of 2.5 million, transfers in of 1.2 million, giving us a positive change for the year of 257,000. The pension trust funds, total assets for the year of 73.9 million. Total liabilities, 7,393. Total net position restricted for pensions, 73,867,585. The additions for the year for the pension trust funds were 3,087,705 of contributions, and that's the state, the borough, and the employees. The net investment income for the year was 8,016,251. Total additions of 11,103,956. We had deductions of benefits out to members, refund of member contributions, and admin expenses of 2.8 million, giving us a positive change for the year of 8,222,656. The long-term liabilities of the borough for the governmental activities, the total is 9,479,979. And for the business type activities, it's 13,240,021. Out of that, on the governmental activities, there's 438,205 due in 2022, and the business type activities has 500,795 due in 2022. Our notes receivable, we have notes receivable for the bid improvement district, as well as the local business that got $200,000. The amount outstanding for that yet is still $236,000. There was no payments received during the year. The amount due in 2022 for that is $8,127. For the police pension plan, I just wanted to describe the change for the year. So at December 31st, 2010, we had a liability of $820,673. We had net changes for the year, positive net changes for the year of $2,753,791, giving us a balance at December 31st, 2021 of an asset of $1,933,118. On the non-uniform side, we started with a liability of $919,658, and we had net changes for the year of a positive $1,340,192, giving us a balance at the end of the year of an asset of $420,534. The OPEB balance started at $5,772,355. That just had some net changes of $41,852 in the positive, so that gave us a decreased balance of $5,730,503 for the year. On a budget to actual basis, the final budgeted amounts for revenues were $15,604,000. The actual revenues that came in were $17,411,000. So we had a positive budget variance of $1.8 million on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, the final budgeted amount was $18.3 million for the expenditures. The expenditures came in at $20,629,626, and that is a negative budget variance of $2.2 million. I want to point out that $2.5 million of that negative budget variance is the tax anticipation note. So without that in there, it would have been a positive budget variance for the year without that. The other financing sources. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's running through the income statement. And so it's another financing source of $2.5 million and then a debt service payment out of $2.5 million. It washes out, but it has to be presented. Yeah. So then in the other financing sources section down below, we have the proceeds from the tax anticipation note. So our total other financing sources were budgeted at $2.8 million, and they came in at $4.5 million. So that was a positive budget variance of $1.7 million. So at the end of the day, we had a positive budget variance overall of $1,261,511. I wanted to point out for the year that the police pension plan had an investment return of 11.64%, and the non-uniform plan had a net investment return of 12.65% for the year. That was all I wanted to go over. If there's any other questions, I'll be happy to try and answer this for you.
How's it looking now with the rebound of the current market conditions?
Well, the market's just starting to rebound, so.
Right, we were down at 21%. We're roughly down, I believe, 11 to 12% in equities right now.
So that's about an $8 million adjustment.
See how fast he did that in his head? That's why we hired him.
See, so this year's gains are going to be erased by this. Well,
Yeah.
last year's gains will be erased by this year's.
Right.
gains.
The follow-up on a couple of different things,
Yeah.
the EIT that we imposed a few years back, at 25 basis points.
Right.
Would that be a direct correlation to the success of the two pensions, the non-uniform and uniform, raising in their percentages?
Yeah, well, I mean, so the borough has contributed more money in the past, and that coupled with the investments returns has pushed it to an asset side. This year in 2021, there was no additional money needed to be put into the pensions because the funding is not considered distressed anymore. I think the plans are both over 95% funded at this point. So that money can be used for other things, and I understand that part of it was used to make the MMO for 2021, but it was imposed as a general revenue, so it can be used for anything.
Well, that's for more discussions, because of the, as we put it in as a resolution or an ordinance, I don't remember how we did it. It was always dedicated, that 25 basis points was dedicated to make sure that the pensions are fully funded or close to fully funded because we were distressed at
Right.
that given time.
The ordinance actually reads general revenue.
Okay,
And since the pensions are no longer considered distressed, it wouldn't be appropriate to keep funneling more money.
overfunding it.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Metric, that's a discussion for another day on the 25 basis points, on what to do with that, as we move forward, coming out of the recession. Yeah, well, I know our negative, our net gain at the end of the year was over $1 million. Considering that we just came out of COVID and all that nonsense, how do we stack up with other municipalities that you service with that?
Well, I mean, it's hard to compare apples to apples between the borough and other municipalities because other municipalities run things through the general fund that the borough has different funds set up for. And so some governments just have the general fund and then all they have is maybe a special revenue fund for the debt service or something like that. So I don't have other governments that have as many funds as the borough does. But everybody is kind of seeing, I haven't seen any losses this year in the general fund. There's losses in other funds just because of the expenditures flowing through the way they do and the transfers haven't been put back to fund them yet. But keep in mind, you had $1 million excess in the current year, but that can switch just like that. And next year you could be in the opposite situation.
You mean from the ARP money?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean from the increase in the EIT.
Oh, increase for the IT,
In case
yeah.
you were thinking about like doing away with it altogether.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
Because I remember standing in here like 2 or 3 years ago saying you guys need more revenues.
Yes, and that's the revenue,
Right.
the
And
revenue
so
stream.
that has now trickled through and it has helped the bottom line.
Excellent. So our net position really is favorable going into 2022 then, is the way you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, the general fund has a negative fund balance, but that's due to the interfunds, which I understand that you guys were talking about doing something about.
Right.
So once in that situation gets taken care of, it'll rectify itself and it'll wash through to a positive fund balance from there.
Very good. Mr. McGinnis, anything else? No. Thank you very much. And the management statement will be coming when?
Well, this is just a draft, so we
Yeah.
have to get it finished up yet.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're struggling with resources, kind of just like everybody else is. So it might be another month yet.
That's okay. The last year when you were here, I was very pleased with your statement, your management statement, and so is Ms. Leonti,
Okay,
because we love being on the positive side. Thank you.
sure.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great night.
Anyone in the audience have any questions about all the numbers that Mr. O'Mara went through? The positive thing is we have money left over at the end of the year. Not a lot, but we have money left over at the end of the year. So, all right. Discussion item, discuss special donation request for United for Her. And there's an attachment. For full disclosure, my daughter Chrissy Flynn, when she had the classic diner in the borough, our family was very much involved with the United for Her, because my wife passed away from cancer, and we at a very young age, and my daughter's very much involved. By saying that, I don't want to upset your presentation, but going forward, please know that it's been the policy of the borough not to contribute taxpayer money to nonprofits, because if we start with you, there'll be every nonprofit in tri-state area asking us for money. I'm going to ask Mr. McGinnis and Mr. Metric to allow us to put it on the discussion for next week and let full borough council decide what it's going to be. I mean, obviously, I would give to it, but I have a conflict of interest, so it's only fair that way.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you want to do a brief presentation, we're going to come back on Tuesday and discuss it again, okay?
Absolutely. Well, and I completely understand that. Thank you. And thank you for allowing me a few minutes. I know Chrissy very well. She does a lot with our Chef and Wine event as well. My name's Cameron Cottrafello, and I'm the Director of Events for Unite for Her. Our office is a block or two that way. So we are really just excited to be back in person this year for our 10th annual Run Walk in downtown Westchester. And just thought it would be something to put on the borough's plate to understand that, what is happening that day. We are the largest run walk to take place in the borough, or at least we were in 2019. And numbers are showing that it should be the same this year as well. And for those not familiar with Unite for Her, because even, and completely understand the stance of the borough, and there's many fabulous nonprofits in the area, but for those who are not aware, because it's always nice for you to know what nonprofits are in the area, and if we can ever support anyone that we are local, and we support those who are going through breast and ovarian cancer by funding integrative therapies and resources for them. So $2,000 they receive every year if they are metastatic, or $2,000 if they are just going through a standard treatment plan from Unite for Her to receive integrative therapies. So this event is one of our signature events. We have 4 of them every year. And this year locally, we should support over 2,000 newly diagnosed and those living with metastatic disease. And because of COVID, we have also gone national. So overall, this coming year, we will support over 5,000 men and women across the country.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess you're okay pushing it on for discussion next week? Yeah, thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. All right, moving on to C, July 2022 financials.
If we could start with page 2, please. So looking at the July 22 cash balance reports, we started the month with $16,724,737 in cash. We brought in $3,135,621. We spent or transferred out $3,510,216. This left us with an ending cash balance of $16,350,142. Of this amount, $9,072,730 is for restricted purposes. Moving over to page 3, as the summary of the interfund activity as it stands now for July 31st. We started the month with interfund activity of $10,030,954. We transferred between funds to work out some of these various balances. We transferred out $239,178. This left us with an interfund activity balance of $9,791,776. Moving over to page 4, the American Rescue Plan review. We currently have $547,319 in our cash account, but this does not include projects that have been approved for but not yet paid. If we subtract that balance of $276,069, we will have a balance in the American Rescue Plans of $271,250 for the first allocation. Moving over to page 5, the budget to actual summary by department for the year ended July 31st. We had actual revenues of $23,029,645. This is offset by actual expense of $18,367,228. This leaves us with a net income for the year of $4,662,417. And of that amount, $3,585,271 is attributable to the general fund. Looking at the year ended July 31st, the overview, at this point in time, we expect departmental budgets to have about 42% of their budgets remaining. Looking at the revenue side, we see both EIT and real estate taxes are doing very well. They're actually beating budget at this point in time. We also had a better than expected return from the health insurance company for our self-insured medical plan. We are still holding off on the transfer to the general fund from the sewer fund. We're still, waiting for the sewer revenues to come in a little bit better than what they're coming in at. They are doing better than prior months, but we still want those numbers to be a little bit higher than what they are now. At this point in time, the sewer fund does owe the general fund about $777,000. We are seeing both the violation of ordinances and deed transfer tax is not coming in at what we expected. We do hope those line items will recover as we continue through the end of the year. Both stream protection and parking of revenues are meeting what our expectations are at this point in time. Looking at the expense side, we see both the general fund and the parking legal other are both over budget. This is due to ongoing obligations. Advertising in the administration fund is over budget. This is due mainly to increased costs for online employment recruiting. Most of our departments had a lot of need for recruiting, and we paid for those fees out of the admin, except for civil service that was paid by the police department. Fuel across the board, higher costs than what we had budgeted. In the boards and commissions line item, we are expecting a grant reimbursement from the county that will help offset the overage in this account for the railroad study. Overtime for public works and police are both within budget. Wastewater is still over budget by about $6,500. And this, again, was due to employee counts being down at various points in time throughout the year. Under the Public Works Department, the transfer to capital includes ARP spending for the street sweeper, which was not budgeted for. We did not budget for the ARPA funds, but the money was there. Fire fund utilities are over budget by $40,000. This is a 5-year contract that has been set at those prices. So when we go to renegotiate, that will be something that we may need to look at other areas where we can put some of those utilities in the general fund. And just across the board, we are seeing higher than expected repair expenses, both in public works and the fire fund. While their budgets are okay now, they are slowly creeping up. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Barb. I have none. Mr. McGinnis?
Moving forward, what do you see in the overall budget as being the biggest constraint? I mean, we talk about fuels. Fuels have come down a little bit. The overtime. I mean, is there anything out there that, a headwind that we should be worried about?
Well, again, I think some of these repairs, I think some of that needs to we need to get a good handle on that. I think in the past, we may have not had good numbers for that in the budget. So I think we need to take a good hard look at that and make sure that, we're taking care of our fleets, our vehicles, everything that are our assets. So that's one big thing. I would definitely, make heed to department heads to look at. Again, I think that's, what we're going through when we're meeting with all of our department heads now. We're going through the budget process, trying to make sure that what we're budgeting for revenues are, logical and they make sense and they're actually going to come in because we use that to offset what our expenses are. So I think just, making sure they know what the task is and making sure that we get some of these numbers right. Obviously, the MMO is always one of our other big numbers, but we expect that to decrease as well going into 2023.
Thank you. Barb, the repairs you're talking about, they're about vehicles?
So they're mainly in the Public Works Department for some of the larger vehicles that
Okay,
we have.
yeah. Yeah,
And in the fire fund, the fire trucks and all that are relatively large expenditures that we have to ship out to different repair facilities.
right, okay, that's understandable. Thank you very much. Mr. Metrick had a thought on the MMO. If the EIT 25 basis points is, if we got the police and the non-uniform people at 95%, as Dale said, I'm not sure it's that high, But if it's that high, we may want to consider maybe using some of the transferring or using that money with council's approval for the MMO. So we make sure that we fund that MMO the way we're supposed to. What's your thought on that one? Because it's every year that goes up. Well, it's going to come down next year because of COVID. But that's a big chunk of money every year that we have to anticipate.
Yeah, and it's a question that the answer has a lot of variables in it. Our MMO projection right now is for decreasing MMO over time, and you'll see that when we talk about the budget trends and outlook that I'll be talking about shortly, that we're going to be experiencing, between 5 and 3% decrease year over year in minimum municipal obligation.
Because of the new pension programs that the new hires are in, right?
That's because you have a closed non-uniform pension that's decreasing steeply, and it's also because the borough's been able to make additional payments to the police pension fund, so it's started to have an effect. The EIT increment went in effect
About 3 years ago?
In 2019.
Yeah.
2019, thank you. So you have now current Act 205 valuations of the police pension plan that reflect that additional money going into it.
Right.
So you've topped off that upward trend, and borough has been able to reduce that. That's going to be that's a big component of managing costs, I think, over the next 10 years, which I'll get to in a second.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bart. The folks in the back of the room, are you waiting for something specifically? Because I know you're not interested in our finance. We already went through that. Yeah, Mr. McGinnis will be able to fill you in. Thank you. I don't want you sitting through, well,
I can find a lot better things to do than to sit here.
all right, moving into our D, our 2023 budget. Mr. Sean Metrick is going to run through the preliminary 2023 budget.
Well, I don't want to oversell it. I'm going to give this is a conversation tonight about trends and outlooks, and I'm going to focus mostly on the general fund. In fact, almost exclusively on the general fund. We'll talk a little bit about interfund transfers, but I think I want to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes about what you're going to expect in the next 2 months, because it's going to start getting busy having to do with the budget. At our September committee meetings, the department heads are going to speak at the appropriate committees about what their budget outlook is for 2023. So Public Works, wastewater will go to Public Works Committee, for instance. And then at the Finance Committee, we'll summarize all that for you next month, those committee level conversations. Then you'll be hearing a presentation from me, Borough Manager's presentation at the September work session, where we should have by then a budget put together. I'm not going to tell you it's finished because we still don't have health insurance information at that point in the year. We may not have our MMO back from the actuary by then. I think we have to deliver it to Borough Council by September 30th by letter, by ordinance. I know that's in a borough code. Yes. Okay, good. And we still may have some undecided factors that could affect the final budget numbers, and I think we should take advantage of that extra time we have between September and November to make those adjustments that we need to do. But in September, we should have, together with the finance team, a complete budget put together with our departmental managers. And then at our October meeting, Council will have the opportunity to schedule a public hearing at the November meeting or do that in December. It's going to be our desire for you to think about scheduling the public hearing in November. You never know what happens. It could snow. schedule it soon. You can have the public hearing, and then we can pass the budget either at the November business meeting or December business meetings. So that's the basic timing of what's going to happen from here on out. But I wanted to provide a framework to the Finance Committee about what we're thinking. We've been spending a lot of time on this, haven't we? Meeting with department heads, talking about the budget. And my goal is over time, it's not going to happen all at once, for the budget document to be a really descriptive document that somebody can learn how the borough operates from. And I think with Dana's assistance, I want to thank her. She put back together the budget we composed last year. If you go on our website and pull up the 2022 budget, you will find all of the departmental summaries. It tells you how many employees are by department, what we do, what some of our outlooks were for 2022. So I'm going to continue on that route. And ultimately, I want to create a budget that makes sense and a budget that lives within the borough's means. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in this presentation. So going on to the second slide, my hope is at the end of this presentation, you'll be able to know what the organic growth is of some of our big line revenue items in the general fund, and the organic growth of expenditures in the general fund, and what assumptions we're using to build the budget for this year. When you dive into general fund revenue, we broke it into 4 categories. People always think it all comes from taxes. A big chunk of it comes from taxes. 53% comes from taxes. But there's very large transfers coming into the general fund from other funds. That's largely coming from parking and sewer. That makes up about 14% of the general fund revenue. But the big gorilla here is the other taxes and fees that I'll talk about in a little more detail later. And we can focus a lot of attention on those things, but that spans operations like public works, police, and other administrative fees and taxes like deed transfer tax, for instance. But earned income tax and property tax are kind of the easiest places to start. So why don't we start there? We looked back at property tax, and those of you who have been familiar with Westchester over the years have probably heard this from prior managers. We are a municipality that has quite a bit of non-taxable property in it. About a third of the total assessed value in the borough is non-taxable. So there's another 300 million or so of non-taxable property value in the borough that we can't get any revenue from. And those properties generate traffic, they generate calls to our police department, they put wear and tear on our roads. Hopefully the employees and people that work and live there use the parks and those things. So they incur liabilities and service needs. But this is the situation we're in. The annual growth in the total assessed value is about $9 million over a 10-year period. The bars show you the dollar amount. 0 is not the bottom of this graph. I'm just showing you the tippy top of the graph. If 0 were the bottom of this graph, it would look kind of depressing because the line would be really flat. Growth is pretty slow. It's growing. The thing that we can tax is only growing at about 1.3% per year over 10 years. The rate at which it changes is the red line that we've imposed over this graph. So some years we get a lot of big projects come in and we get like a 3% growth in our assessed value. So we got to keep our eye on big projects coming down the pike because that could have an effect on the bottom line. Even with all of this, with these very big numbers and this very slow growth, if you were to do nothing with the tax rate, this revenue line item would grow about $71,000 a year. If you just kept it at the 7.7 mill rate that you have today. So keep that number in mind. That's the organic growth rate of revenue from property tax. So we looked at earned income tax, and to make sure we kept apples to apples, this is just the 1%. We didn't include the 0.25 in this summary. What we wanted to detect was how is earned income tax changing over time. And what we learned looking at this is that it is a little steeper. There is better growth here year over year in the blue bars on a dollar basis and on a percentage basis. However, that growth is a little harder to predict. The red line has a lot more peaks and valleys to it. So in 2016, for instance, the EIT grew by almost 11%. And this is actual EIT collected. This is not a budgeted number. This is what we actually collected. So I'm conservative is not a bad word. I'm a very conservative financial person, and so is Barb. So you're going to get a very conservative outlook on revenue. We're always going to be a little below what we think we're going to get on revenue, and budget-wise a little high on expenditures, just a little bit, because we're always thinking we're not going to do as well as we think we are on revenue, and we might end up spending more than we need. That way, if your budget hits your target, and you can accrue a little bit, you can be a little bit in the black when you end the year. And that's something I think that's good budget practice. So a couple more months, we'll solidify these following opinions we have about the EIT, but we want to make sure that when we budget, that we're within a range of 5% of what the actual EIT number is projected out to be. So we're going to assume that there's going to be a 2.25% increase in the collections, and that's going to yield about $100,000 extra in next year's budget if we do nothing to the percentage rate. So that's, again, organic growth in your EIT is about 100% if we presume these assumptions. We can maybe go a little steeper on these, depending on how collections go in the next couple of months. But by steeper, I don't mean 6% growth or 7% growth. I mean like 2.75% or 3%. I think I could live with, depending on how much money we bring in the next couple of months. So now you're talking about this plus the last number, about $175,000 to $200,000 of just organic growth without doing anything to your tax rates. We're going to talk now about the smaller piece of the pie that I showed you in the pie chart that we started with. This is only 14% of the total. This is money coming from other funds to support general fund activity. This is mostly coming from sewer and parking fund. There is some stream protection funds dollars coming to the general fund. These dollars from sewer and stream protection all have to be supported. What I mean by that is if you have, for instance, like we do, public works employees whose main task it is to go out and work on sewer maintenance issues, then that labor that the general fund is expending can be rightfully reimbursed by the sewer fund. But you need that support, and it needs to be legitimate, it needs to be calculated, and it needs to be part of your budget as an appendix to your budget. All of your transfers of those types need support. The parking fund transfer is totally different. The parking fund transfer is just a straight up subsidy. There is not $1.7 million of work that the general fund is doing on behalf of the parking fund that the parking fund needs to pay back. This is net profit from operations, so to speak. That's why the pandemic was such a shock to the borough. All of our meter revenue and ticket revenue disappeared for 3 months and was slow to recover. So when you're leaning into parking fund transfers for 14% of your budget, more or less, 15% of your budget, and it goes away, you have a big problem. But this is the reality of Westchester. I think it works. I think if we manage parking effectively, we can lean into this and use it to subsidize general fund activities. Knowing that it can go south, we should be really paying attention to having enough cushion in our general fund for those rainy days that come along, which was the conversation I had at the ACT committee last night. And I just showed on slide number 8 a little detail of the support that we provide for the sewer fund transfer that we are doing this year in 2022, an example of what that looks like. I don't want to dwell too much on that one. I've got 2 more slides to go through and a spreadsheet I want to look at because we do need to talk about spending money to run all of these government services that we're responsible for. But before I get there, we have a third of our revenue coming from this other revenue category that I mentioned. And I want to be very clear that a large part of this is coming from the contract we have with East Bradford Township for police services. This involves 6 full-time officers, detective services, lockup, you name it. It's a soup to nuts coverage of East Bradford's policing needs. The contract is up in 2023. It's very specific as to what the borough shall provide, and that dollar amount you see there is pays officers' salaries. What I'm saying is if we didn't have that contract, we wouldn't be able to employ the 6 officers that service East Bradford Township. So I'm very committed to making sure that this regional policing model works, that it works for the borough and that it works for East Bradford Township, because it is a big chunk of this other piece of the pie. We're going to be looking hard at permit revenues for building and housing and public works to make sure that we're charging the right amount for these services. That's something we do every year. And then we keep a good an eye on deed transfer, and that is a tax paid at settlement when properties change hands that we're all probably familiar with if we've bought or sold property in our lives. So we just look at trends there. We try to make a good educated guess about what the market is doing. Certainly prices, home prices in the borough have continued to rise, and that will reflect in rising deed transfer tax revenues. There are about 20 to 25 general ledger accounts that fall under this other revenue category. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I want everybody to know that we're paying close attention to them, even the small ones, to make sure that we've got the right numbers in our budget, because that everything adds up, and that 33% of our general fund pie is a big, huge piece. So lastly, I just want to have a conversation briefly, if there weren't any questions so far. Stop me if you want to, anybody. About general fund expenditures. We are a service-based organization driven mostly by payroll expenditures. We don't have any plans, big plans, to change those services that we offer or commit to any different staffing levels that we aren't at right now. That's my long way of saying there's 125 full-time equivalent employees in the borough's purview right now. We're budgeting to keep that steady going into next year. However, when you look at that, and also required from the Home Rule Charter of the management team is a projection of 5-year projections. And I want to refer you to the large spreadsheet I printed out for the committee members of something I did last year. And this will be updated for September, where we looked at projections of growth in different departmental categories. And you can look at them on a percentage base, and you can look at them on a departmental base, on a real dollar base on this below. These are budgeted amounts. These are not actuals. So the interesting thing to look here is, let's start with the bottom line number. What's the organic growth of general fund expenditures year over year? It's more or less for the next 5 years between $630,000 $750,000. The reason 2026 has that big jump is that when we did this spreadsheet for everybody last year, we were proposing additional borrowing in 2026 to fund or finance construction of a new public works facility, because we knew that was on the horizon. We just didn't know what year that was going to land. We wanted to see what that would look like if we plugged that into our projections. But the organic growth in general fund expenditures is between $630,000 and $750,000 over the next 5 years. There's just no other way to look at it unless you start cutting services and staff. And we look down at the departmental change year over year. You can see that there are some higher percentage changes. I want to also pause and highlight that the police pension and non-uniform pension plans are both projected to decrease in costs going forward, 5% year over year for non-uniform and 3.25% for police pension. So together, that's yielding anywhere from 90 to $85,000 of found money each year from decreasing costs. Remember, when they calculate MMOs, they're calculating them to resolve or to provide fully funded status for the pension funds over a long period of time. So everything gets smoothed out when you send it to the actuary and you're figuring out what needs to be put into the funds each year over a long period of time. So likewise, we are smoothing out this decrease in the MMO over a long period of time. However, this decrease is only yielding about 85,000 to 90,000 of found expenditures, decrease in expenditures, whereas we have pretty significant growth in other departments. And we are service-based, personnel-based, and some of the highest paid employees in the borough are in your police department. So that's why you're seeing growth of anywhere from $400,000 to $450,000 per year just from police department operations. So these are the facts. Organic growth gets you about $175,000 a year of new revenue, and organic expenditure growth yields about $675,000 of new expenditures every year. So our problem is, where does the $500,000 come from? So Barbara is having a bake sale to help make this happen. No, I'm joking around. We have a plan. I don't want people to come away from this too worried. We have a plan. We also have American Rescue Plan Act dollars that we can leverage towards capital purchases. The borough has in the past and will do so next year, finance capital improvements with current cash. I will look for every opportunity. Barbara and I will look for every opportunity we can to use that grant funding source for that.
If I may interrupt here, has there been any word from state, county government regarding infrastructure going down to municipalities, especially Westchester Borough? I mean, I think that would probably help alleviate some of what we're talking about.
Well, I think a lot, this may not be what you're asking me, but a lot of municipalities and counties are in the same position as the borough is right now, which is looking for ways to utilize this funding, because it's being distributed over a 4-year period and you have to spend it over a 6-year period. We're already in year 2. So the county did, correct. Yeah. And are you talking about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act? Okay. Okay. No, but the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is a very nice sounding label, but it is for a transportation funding bill that's been around since since the late 90s. It's called T21. It was called what was it called? I forget all the names for it. Safety. Anyway, it's a 6-year reauthorization bill for transportation funding. And there's oftentimes a lot, whenever you get big bills from the federal government, it can have lots of other stuff in it. And they think of a new label every time it gets reauthorized. And this time around, it's called investment. Sorry, I remember the acronym, IIJA. I can't remember the words off the top of my head all the time. Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. That's my long way of saying I have not received any direct guidance. That's a great point. Looking for partnerships, looking for funding partnerships to offset our current cash capital obligations, which typically run around $300,000 to $600,000 a year if you look back at past budgets. We have a contract coming up that we're negotiating. So this is like basic housekeeping. You have to make sure you're not inviting any great big cost overruns down the road. And some other things we are trying to do. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we had talked about that. Putting things out to bid, getting the lowest qualified bidder, making sure that our insurance providers are providing the best services at the least cost. These kinds of things, just good day-to-day management, I think can help us narrow that gap, narrow that $500,000 gap. So that's all I wanted to cover tonight, as well as answer any questions the committee could have, may have.
I have a couple really brief ones because you'll be going over this more and more again. As Mr. McGinnis mentioned, the county and the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth, have we received any monies from them at all trickled down? I know we got the federal money, but the county was supposed to distribute a bunch of money to the different municipalities. Have we gotten anything from them on that?
No, no. But I'll check up on that.
Okay, follow up on another question since you're standing there. Has the county paid their tax bill that they owe us from the sale of 313? That's a positive, that's $100,000. That's a positive. What is our projected, revenue number for 2023? I believe our revenue in 2022 was what, 29 million?
That sounds like general with parking and sewer included.
Right, yeah. So
I don't have a projection, total bottom line projection number yet for you.
yeah, okay.
I'll
So,
have that
but
in September.
but in 2021 is about 29 million?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. All right.
You mean for this year's budget, 22?
Yeah, for 22.
Yeah.
For an old guy with gray hair, my memory's pretty good with, with that stuff. And the last thing, which I didn't see and which is a thorn in our side at this particular time, is the liquid fuels issues. Have we come to a consensus on how to handle the liquid fuels?
We have come to you're talking about the requirement to refund the general fund, refund the liquid fuels fund. That's a $404,000 problem. And we have found about $360,000 solution to date, and we're looking for the other 40, which I think we can do with street sweeping labor costs.
Very good. That makes me
Yes.
very happy.
So we're looking at the street sweeper purchase that the borough made this year and street lighting expenditures, which run about $8,000 to $9,000 a month
Right,
in the
right.
borough.
Excellent. Anyone in the audience have anything to say? Darrell's not here tonight, so I guess there's no one. Mr. Williams? Okay. And what's that called? The grant, the funding? Oh, okay, yeah. That's what I was just asking Mr. Metric. Yeah, I'll place a phone call into a couple of county commissioners to put a bug in their ear. Thank you very much. Anything else with this, Mr. McGinnis? No. Thank you, Mr. Metric. All right, action items. Approve the July 2022 minutes. So move. All right, this is going to be it's not a bait and switch, but it kind of is at this point. United for Her is a nonprofit that stands alone in the borough and raises funds and distributes for breast cancer and cancer treatment. Under number B, approved 2022 Westchester Downtown Foundation Serpentine. We're basically funding ourselves for the downtown, Westchester downtown. It's the Up on the Roof that's held every year. And this is one of the nonprofits that we do support because all the money that they collect or distribute comes directly back into the downtown borough area. So Mr. McGinnis, it's $800. Do you support the $800? Thank you. That's 2-0. Under other business, any other business? I have one item under other business. At our last July meeting, I told council that I was going to do a snapshot for discussion only of the solicitor for municipalities for the borough. And I provided Mr. Metric tonight with a copy and Mr. McGinnis with a copy. And there are four law firms that, through their submittal, have given us pricing to do municipality work, solicitor municipality work. The first one's Randolph Clark, Kilkenny, Buckley Bryan, and Belwar Kelly. What I did was I put in the spreadsheet that Dana was very happy, helpful with me. I put years of business, number of full-time lawyers, municipalities with colleges or universities in it, diversity, location in the borough, and their hourly rate. So this is a thumbnail of just for the solicitors. I'll do the ones for wastewater and land development now that I have all the numbers in today for the next meeting next month. But the way it stacks up now, from the lowest to the highest for solicitor, Randolph Clark is the lowest, then Kilkenny and Buckley Bryan and Belwar Kelly. The only caveat for Randolph Clark is that they have no offices in the borough. All the other businesses do have offices in the borough. And I don't know whether council will discount that fact, but it was very important to council to have a solicitor that has an existing office in the building, in the borough. So I've given it to Mr. Metric. We'll put it on the screen maybe for our work session. So council can get a glance just at the solicitors, and then the wastewater and the land development people will do next month, because there's a lot of work that goes into it. I physically went to every office. I talked to every office. I interviewed the person that submitted the RFP, and this is all the information that I think council will need to make some decisions on the new solicitor for the borough after the RFP. So, Mr. McGinnis, you have any questions on it?
No, thank you. Thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
Anyone? Mayor, I'll make sure you get a copy of it. Oh, they'll all get it, yeah. Yep, yeah. I gave it to Mr. Metric, so they'll make sure it goes out for everybody to look over, because it'll give them some time to digest it, over the weekend or Monday before the work session. Yeah, it's pretty basic. When I give it to you, you'll see how basic it is, but it's full of important information. So it's very easy to decide by looking at what we have just for solicitors. So any other questions? No other business? The meeting is adjourned at 7:35.